October 21st, 1940. Dawn breaks over the windswept marshlands of eastern Belgium. Through gaps in the morning mist, the unmistakable silhouette of a Hawker Hurricane Mk IID appears, flying dangerously low across the landscape. At the controls, Flight Lieutenant James Cobber Allard peers through the scratched canopy, scanning the terrain below. Intelligence reports had placed a German Panzer column moving through this sector tanks that just hours before had smashed through a Belgian infantry position, leaving nothing but burning vehicles and fallen soldiers. The Hurricane's engine, a temperamental Rolls-Royce Merlin, strains as Allard drops even lower, practically skimming the treetops. His aircraft, deemed obsolete by the German High Command just months earlier, carries a deadly new modification. Two 40mm cannon pods mounted beneath the wings, each loaded with armor-piercing rounds. What happens next will shatter every principle of armored warfare the Germans held sacred. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Within 8 hours of Allard's dawn patrol, 14 German Panzer IIIs and IVs would lie burning across the Belgian countryside. A single obsolete fighter, piloted by a former crop duster from New Zealand, had destroyed an entire company of Germany's vaunted armoured force. The shocked German survivors would report that they hadn't been fighting an aircraft, they had been hunted by an aerial tank killer that redefined battlefield interdiction. The stunned German High Command initially dismissed these reports as the exaggerations of battle-shocked troops. After all, their intelligence assessments had classified the Hurricane as outdated, a relic compared to their own Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters. What the Germans failed to understand was that the Royal Air Force had transformed this supposedly outmoded fighter into something entirely new, the world's first dedicated anti-tank aircraft. The Hurricane's journey from conventional fighter to tank destroyer began 6 months earlier in the laboratories and workshops of Britain's desperate weapons development program. As German forces swept across Europe in the spring of 1940, British military planners faced a terrifying reality. Conventional anti-tank weapons were proving inadequate against the advancing Panzer divisions. Sir Henry Tizard, scientific advisor to the Air Ministry, had championed an audacious concept: modify existing aircraft to carry weapons capable of penetrating tank armor from above, where protection was thinnest. The Hurricane, with its sturdy wing structure and increasingly limited value as a frontline fighter, became the perfect platform for this experiment. Engineers at Hawker Aircraft Limited worked around the clock to modify the Hurricane's wing structure to carry two Vickers S 40mm cannons, weapons, originally designed as anti-aircraft guns, but reconfigured to fire armor-piercing rounds. The modifications required extensive reinforcement of the wing spars and the development of a specialized gun sight that allowed pilots to align their approach precisely with the target below. What emerged was designated the Hurricane Mk IID, an aircraft that looked like a conventional fighter but functioned as an airborne tank hunter. Initial testing at the Aeroballistic Research Facility in Lincolnshire produced startling results. From the correct angle of attack, the 40mm rounds could penetrate up to 70mm of armour, enough to destroy any German tank from above. Pilots selected for the specialized Hurricane squadrons underwent intensive training that bore little resemblance to conventional fighter tactics. Rather than dogfighting or high-altitude interception, these pilots practiced extreme low-level flying, often at altitudes below 30 meters. They learned to identify tank types by silhouette, to recognize the vulnerable points in German armor, and to execute a precise attack profile that maximized their chances of penetration while minimizing exposure to anti-aircraft fire. The attack method required extraordinary courage. Approach at treetop level, pull up sharply just before the target, roll inverted to identify the tank precisely, then dive at a 60-degree angle, firing a short burst at specific aim points: engine deck, turret ring, or fuel tanks, before pulling out at an altitude sometimes as low as 15 meters. Flight Lieutenant James Allard had been among the first pilots selected for this specialized role. A New Zealander who had flown crop dusters before the war, Allard possessed the precise flying skills and nerves of steel required for the mission. During training, he had demonstrated an uncanny ability to place his aircraft exactly where it needed to be, regardless of weather conditions or enemy fire. His squadron commander noted in evaluation reports, "Allard flies as though the aircraft is an extension of his own body. His precision in low-level attack scenarios exceeds anything I've previously witnessed." This skill would prove decisive on that October morning over Belgium. The German Panzer column that Allard encountered belonged to the 3rd Panzer Division, a veteran unit that had spearheaded the blitzkrieg through Poland, France, and now pushed toward the strategic port of Antwerp. Commanded by Hauptmann Werner Kluge, the column comprised 20 Panzer IIIs and IVs, supported by motorized infantry and light anti-aircraft units. These forces represented the elite of German armoured warfare crews, trained to perfection at the Panzer schools in Wunsdorf, equipped with machines that embodied German engineering excellence. The Panzer III, with its 50mm KWK 38L, 42-gun and 30mm frontal armour, could destroy any Allied tank it encountered from ranges exceeding 800 metres. The Panzer IV, armed with the lethal 75mm K-Buch K40 gun, was even more formidable. German tank doctrine emphasized the Kesselschlacht, the cauldron battle, where superior mobility, communications, and firepower allowed panzer units to encircle and annihilate enemy forces. This doctrine had proven devastatingly effective across Europe, creating a mystique of invincibility around German armoured formations. Hauptmann Kluge's battle journal, recovered after the war, reveals complete confidence as his unit moved through Belgium that October morning. "Our reconnaissance reports minimal resistance ahead. The British armour reported in this sector appears to have withdrawn. Air activity minimal due to poor weather conditions. Anticipate reaching objective by 1800 hours." What Kluge couldn't know was that his column had been spotted by Belgian resistance fighters, who had relayed its position to British intelligence. Within hours, this information reached the forward airfield, where Allard's squadron was based. The squadron commander, squadron leader Michael Kilburn, immediately authorized a strike mission despite the marginal weather conditions. "If we can catch them in the open, before they reach the forest," Kilburn told Allard during the hastily arranged briefing, "we might just give Jerry a nasty surprise." Allard studied the crude map showing the German column's reported position and likely route. "Weather's not exactly ideal, sir," he observed, referring to the patchy ground fog and intermittent rain. Kilburn nodded grimly. "Precisely why they won't be expecting us." At 0530 hours, Allard's Hurricane thundered down the muddy airstrip, the Merlin engine straining as the heavily armed aircraft fought for altitude. 2 other Hurricanes followed, piloted by flying officers Raymond Peters and George Westlake. The 3 aircraft formed up and headed east, flying barely 100 metres above the war-torn landscape. Their navigation depended not on instruments but on visual recognition of roads, rivers and villages, many now reduced to rubble by the advancing German forces. The low-altitude flight profile was not merely tactical but necessary. The cloud ceiling that morning hung at just 200 metres, making higher altitude flight impossible without losing visual contact with the ground. As Allard's Hurricane approached the reported location of the German column, he throttled back, reducing engine noise to avoid early detection. The aircraft's drab, brown and green camouflage blended perfectly with the autumn landscape below. Through breaks in the ground fog, he caught glimpses of movement on a narrow country road, the unmistakable silhouettes of German armour moving in convoy formation. Allard keyed his radio, breaking radio silence for the briefest message. "Tally-ho. Target acquired. Engaging now." With practiced precision, he banked his Hurricane toward the column's lead vehicles, descending to an altitude of merely 50 metres. The 1st Panzer in the column, a command vehicle with Hauptmann Kluge aboard, received no warning of the incoming attack. German doctrine emphasized the threat from enemy armour or ground-based anti-tank weapons. Air attack against armoured vehicles was considered a minimal risk, especially in poor weather conditions. The column moved with open hatches, commanders standing exposed in turrets to maintain visual contact in the limited visibility. Anti-aircraft gunners, positioned on vehicles spaced through the column, scanned the cloudy skies intermittently, but without real expectation of enemy air activity. Allard's attack run followed the precise protocol developed during months of training. Approaching from the convoy's flank at extreme low altitude, he waited until the last possible moment before pulling up sharply, exposing the Panzer column's position to his wingmen who followed 30 seconds behind. Rolling his aircraft inverted at the top of his climb, Allard confirmed his primary target, a Panzer IV near the center of the column, then pushed the stick forward, diving at a steep angle toward the tank. The Hurricane's airframe groaned under the G-forces as Allard aligned the specialized gun sight on the Panzer's engine deck. At a range of just 200 meters, Allard squeezed the firing button on his control stick. The Hurricane shuddered as the twin 40mm cannons fired, each round weighing nearly 2 pounds and carrying an armor-piercing core capable of punching through the Panzer's thin top armor. The attack lasted barely 3 seconds, but in that time, 4 armor-piercing rounds struck the Panzer IV-3, penetrating the engine compartment, and 1 striking the turret ring, jamming it in position. As Allard pulled out of his dive, barely clearing the trees beyond the road, the stricken Panzer erupted in flames, ammunition cooking off inside the hull with secondary explosions that blew the turret completely off the vehicle. The German column erupted in chaos. Trained to respond to ground-based threats, the Panzer crews had no established protocol for air attack at such close quarters. Some commanders ordered their gunners to elevate main guns, attempting to track the fast-moving aircraft. Others directed machine gunners to engage, filling the air with tracer rounds that mostly passed harmlessly behind the attacking Hurricanes. The column's dedicated anti-aircraft units, equipped with 20mm Flak 38 guns, struggled to bring their weapons to bear as the Hurricanes approached from unexpected angles, using the broken terrain as cover until the final moments of their attack runs. Flying Officer Peters followed Allard into the attack, selecting a Panzer III at the column's rear. His approach mirrored Allard's precision, low, fast, then a sharp pull-up and dive. 4 40mm rounds struck the Panzer III's thinner rear deck armor, 2 penetrating the engine compartment and 2 striking the ammunition storage area. The resulting explosion was catastrophic, the tank's turret blown 30 meters into a nearby field. The third Hurricane, piloted by Westlake, targeted another Panzer IV, achieving similar results. Within 90 seconds of the initial attack, 3 German tanks burned fiercely, their crews either dead or desperately attempting to escape the flames. The surviving German tanks scattered, breaking formation in an attempt to find cover beneath the trees lining the roadway. This dispersal, while logical against conventional air attack, played directly into the Hurricane pilot's tactical advantage. Isolated tanks proved easier targets, lacking the concentrated anti-aircraft fire that might have deterred attack. Allard regrouped his flight 2 kilometers from the ambush site, climbing into cloud cover before circling back for a second attack. The 3 Hurricanes approached from different directions this time, further confusing the German response. Allard's second attack run targeted Panzer III that had sought shelter beneath a large oak tree. Diving through a gap in the clouds, Allard aligned his aircraft with clinical precision, firing as the tank attempted to reverse into deeper cover. 2 40mm rounds penetrated the thinner side armor near the fuel tanks, igniting the diesel fuel and creating a fireball that consumed both tank and tree. Peters and Westlake each claimed another tank in this second attack wave, bringing the morning's toll to 6 destroyed German tanks in less than 15 minutes without a single loss to the attacking aircraft. The psychological impact of the attack exceeded the physical destruction. German tank crews, elite soldiers who had cultivated a sense of invulnerability inside their armored vehicles, suddenly found themselves exposed to a threat they couldn't effectively counter. Radio transmissions from the beleaguered column, intercepted by British signal intelligence, revealed the growing panic. Under heavy air attack. Cannot effectively engage. Request immediate fighter cover. Hauptmann Kluge, whose command Panzer had narrowly avoided destruction in the initial attack, ordered the remaining vehicles to disperse into a nearby forest, abandoning the planned route and timeline. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. By mid-morning, weather conditions had deteriorated further, with low clouds and intermittent rain providing perfect cover for the hurricanes to withdraw, refuel, rearm, and plan their next attack. At the forward airfield, Allard and his pilots debriefed their squadron commander, providing detailed information about the German column's last known position and likely movement. Maintenance crews swarmed over the hurricanes, replenishing ammunition and checking for damage. Remarkably, despite flying through intense but inaccurate anti-aircraft fire, none of the 3 aircraft had sustained more than minor damage, a testament to the hurricane's legendary ruggedness. Squadron leader Kilburn immediately recognized the opportunity presented by the disrupted German column. They'll be regrouping, assessing damage, perhaps waiting for the weather to clear before moving again, he told his pilots during the briefing for the second mission. That makes them stationary targets. Intelligence updates from resistance sources confirmed this assessment. The surviving German tanks had indeed taken cover in a forested area approximately 3 kilometers from the initial attack site, with recovery vehicles attempting to retrieve damaged tanks that might be repaired. At 13:15 hours, Allard led a second flight of 4 Hurricanes, the original 3 plus a 4th piloted by Flight Lieutenant David Morrison toward the German position. The weather had worsened, with ceiling now down to just 100 meters, but this only increased the Hurricane's advantage. German fighter cover, urgently requested after the morning attack, remained grounded at airfields further east due to the deteriorating conditions. The Panzer column, partially concealed in the forest but with vehicles still visible from above, presented multiple stationary targets. The second attack proved even more devastating than the first. Approaching from 4 different directions simultaneously, the Hurricanes struck before effective anti-aircraft fire could be organized. Allard's target, a recovery vehicle attempting to tow a damaged Panzer III, disintegrated under the impact of 640mm rounds. Peters destroyed 2 Panzer IIIs parked side by side, their crews caught during a maintenance operation with hatches open and engines exposed. Westlake and Morrison each claimed another tank, bringing the day's total to 11 confirmed kills. The remaining German vehicles, now reduced to less than half their original strength, abandoned their heavy equipment and retreated eastward, effectively ending the Panzer column's offensive capability. But Allard wasn't finished. Late afternoon brought a brief improvement in weather conditions, just enough for one final strike. Intelligence reports indicated that the surviving German tanks had regrouped at a small village 7 kilometers east, establishing defensive positions while awaiting reinforcements. At 16:45 hours, Allard took off alone, his Hurricane carrying a full load of ammunition plus 2 250-pound general-purpose bombs hastily fitted to wing hardpoints. The aircraft, already at the limits of its design specifications with the heavy 40mm cannons, handled sluggishly with the added bomb load, but Allard's exceptional piloting skills compensated for the compromised performance. Approaching the German position from the south, where anti-aircraft defences appeared weakest, Allard executed a daring low-level bombing run against a group of 3 Panzers positioned near the village church. Both bombs struck with remarkable accuracy, destroying 2 tanks outright and disabling the third. As German anti-aircraft gunners finally brought effective fire to bear, Allard climbed sharply, disappeared into cloud cover, then re-emerged from an unexpected direction to deliver a devastating cannon attack against the remaining tanks. Within 7 minutes, he had destroyed 3 more Panzers, bringing his personal tally for the day to 8 and the squadron's total to 14. The day's events shattered German assumptions about air power's role in anti-tank warfare. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, commanding German forces in the West, demanded an immediate assessment from Luftwaffe commanders. The resulting report, found in German archives after the war, acknowledged with surprising candor the new threat posed by modified ground attack aircraft. The enemy has developed a concerning capability to attack armored formations with specially modified fighters carrying heavy-caliber weapons. These attacks, conducted at extremely low altitude and with precise targeting, demonstrate a level of effectiveness previously thought impossible. Standard anti-aircraft defences attached to Panzer units prove inadequate against these tactics. The Luftwaffe's technical assessment section further analysed recovered wreckage from destroyed Panzers, confirming that the Hurricane's 40mm cannon shells had penetrated armour that German engineers had considered proof against air attack. This revelation prompted an immediate directive to increase top armour thickness on all future German tank designs and to develop improved mobile anti-aircraft systems to accompany armoured columns. The psychological impact extended beyond technical considerations. German tank crews, who had operated with near impunity across Europe, suddenly found themselves vulnerable to attack from a quarter they had dismissed as ineffective. Flight Lieutenant Allard's actions that October day earned him immediate recognition. The official citation for his Distinguished Flying Cross, awarded 2 weeks later, stated, "Flight Lieutenant Allard displayed extraordinary courage and exceptional flying skill in attacking and destroying multiple enemy armoured vehicles under extremely challenging conditions. His actions single-handedly neutralized a significant enemy offensive capability and demonstrated the effectiveness of specialized anti-tank aircraft operations." What the citation couldn't capture was the transformative effect Allard's success had on Allied air doctrine. Within weeks, the Royal Air Force accelerated production of modified Hurricanes, creating dedicated tank buster squadrons deployed specifically to counter German armoured thrusts. By 1941, over 100 Hurricane Mk IIIs operated in this specialized role, their pilots trained using methods developed from Allard's experiences. The concept quickly extended beyond the Hurricane to other aircraft, including the Hawker Typhoon-equipped, with rockets a development that would prove decisive during the Normandy campaign in 1944. For the Germans, the lesson came too late. Their tank design philosophy had emphasized frontal armor protection against ground-based threats, with minimal attention to overhead vulnerability. Attempts to retrofit existing tanks with improved top armor proved inadequate and compromised other performance characteristics. New designs incorporating better overhead protection wouldn't reach frontline units in significant numbers before war's end. Meanwhile, Allied air forces continuously refined their anti-tank capabilities, creating what German crews came to call the Jabos fighter bombers that hunted tanks with terrifying efficiency. The legacy of Allard's 14-tank day extended well beyond World War II. Military theorists studying the engagement recognized it as the birth of modern close air support doctrine, the integration of air power directly into ground operations against specific high-value targets. The specialized pilot training methods developed for Hurricane tank hunters evolved into modern attack helicopter tactics. The weapon systems concepts pioneered in those desperate modifications to an obsolete fighter-influenced aircraft design for decades, culminating in dedicated ground attack aircraft like the Aachen Thunderbolt II, specifically designed around a massive anti-tank cannon. James Cobber Allard survived the war, returning to New Zealand in 1945 after completing over 100 combat missions. His logbook, preserved at the Royal Air Force Museum in London, records his matter-of-fact assessment of October 21, 1940. Weather poor. Attacked enemy armour column vicinity Ardennes. 8 confirmed destroyed. Aircraft performed admirably despite additional weight. Minor flak damage to port wing, easily repaired. This understated entry belies the revolutionary impact of what he had, accomplished transforming an obsolete fighter into the world's first effective airborne tank killer and rewriting the rules of modern warfare in a single remarkable day. The Hurricane's transformation from outdated fighter to lethal tank killer became a crucial case study within the Royal Air Force. Detailed after-action analyses conducted in November 1940 revealed that Flight Lieutenant Allard's success was not merely a statistical anomaly, but represented a fundamental shift in air-to-ground tactics. Air Vice Marshal Arthur Conyngham, commanding the Desert Air Force, recognized the strategic implications immediately. Within weeks, he had established a specialized training unit at Helwan, Egypt, where pilots were taught the precise attack profiles that Allard had pioneered. The results were impressive. By January 1941, 5 Hurricane squadrons had been converted to the anti-tank role, each achieving kill ratios that consistently outperformed conventional anti-tank weapons. The psychological impact of these tank-busting hurricanes extended beyond battlefield statistics. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, whose Afrika Korps would later face these modified fighters in the Western Desert, noted in his personal diary, "The morale effect of aircraft attacking tanks should not be underestimated. Even when actual losses are minimal, the knowledge that one may be attacked from above at any moment creates a tension that exhausts crews and disrupts operations." This psychological advantage proved as tactically significant as the physical destruction of tanks. German armoured units began to operate only at dawn or dusk, sacrificing operational tempo to avoid hurricane attacks during daylight hours, a constraint that gave Allied ground forces crucial breathing space during critical phases of the North African campaign. What made the Hurricane particularly suitable for this specialized role was its inherent structural strength. Unlike more modern monoplane fighters with stress-bearing metal skins, the Hurricane retained an internal framework of steel tubes, a legacy of its biplane ancestry. This robust structure could absorb significant battle damage and still return home, a critical advantage when operating at the extreme low altitudes required for effective anti-tank attacks. Squadron records from No. 6 Squadron, which operated Hurricane IIDs in North Africa from June 1942, document numerous cases of aircraft returning with major structural damage that would have downed more advanced designs. One particularly notable case involved Flight Sergeant Thomas Wells, whose Hurricane absorbed over 30 hits from small arms fire, yet remained flyable for the 200-mile return to base. The modification program that transformed standard Hurricanes into specialized tank killers represented British engineering pragmatism at its finest. Rather than designing an entirely new aircraft, an impossibility, given wartime production constraints, engineers at Hawker worked with what they had. The Hurricane's wide-track landing gear provided the stability needed for the heavy weapons, while its thick wings offered the structural strength to mount the massive 40mm cannons. The conversion process, refined at maintenance units in Egypt, could transform a standard Hurricane into a tank killer in under 48 hours using locally available materials and tools. This adaptability proved crucial as front lines shifted and tactical requirements evolved throughout the desert campaign. Beyond the technical achievements, the human element in this transformation cannot be overlooked. The pilots who flew these modified Hurricanes required a unique combination of skills: the precision of a surgeon, the situational awareness of a hunter, and the courage to deliberately place themselves within range of concentrated anti-aircraft fire. Training documents from the period reveal the extraordinarily specific instructions given to these specialized pilots. Approach at maximum speed, at an altitude of 30 to 50 feet. At a distance of approximately 800 yards from the target, pull up to 200 feet. Roll inverted to identify tank type and specific aim points. Push over into a 30 to 45 degree diving attack. Fire a 2-second burst at a range of 300 yards, targeting the engine deck or turret ring. Pull out at an altitude no lower than 20 feet. The meteorological conditions in which these pilots operated added another layer of complexity to their already demanding missions. The distinctive atmospheric conditions of the Western Desert, heat haze, sandstorms, and mirages, created visual distortions that complicated target acquisition and ranging. To counter these effects, Hurricane pilots developed specialized techniques for desert operations. They learned to recognize the subtle shadow patterns of partially concealed tanks, to distinguish between genuine targets and decoys from the unique reflection patterns of sunlight on metal, and to time attacks for the golden hours of early morning and late afternoon, when contrast was highest and heat distortion minimal. These techniques were codified in a confidential manual titled Desert Air Operations, which became required reading for all Allied pilots operating in North Africa. Perhaps most remarkably, these specialized Hurricane operations created a unique form of inter-service cooperation rarely seen in earlier stages of the war. Royal Air Force pilots began working directly with forward elements of the Eighth Army, developing informal but effective communication protocols that transcended the rigid chain of command. Tank regiments assigned liaison officers to Hurricane squadrons, providing detailed intelligence on German armor movements and capabilities. In return, Hurricane pilots visited tank units to better understand the vehicles they hunted from above. This cross-pollination of tactical knowledge created a synergy that multiplied the effectiveness of both services. Major General Bernard Freyberg, commanding New Zealand forces in North Africa, noted, "The coordination between our armoured units and the RAF's tank-hunting Hurricanes represents a new form of combined operations that has caught the enemy entirely unprepared." The technical evolution of the Hurricane's anti-tank capabilities continued throughout 1942 and 43. The original 40mm Vickers S guns, while effective, suffered from limited ammunition capacity and occasional reliability issues in desert conditions. Engineers at the Middle East Development Unit in Egypt experimented with various alternatives, including captured German 37mm flak guns modified for aircraft use. By mid-1943, a superior version emerged, the Vickers P cannon, with an improved rate of fire, better reliability in dusty conditions, and ammunition featuring a more aerodynamic profile that reduced trajectory drop at longer ranges. This continuous improvement cycle reflected the pragmatic approach that characterized British wartime innovation, incremental enhancements based on frontline feedback rather than revolutionary but unproven concepts. The German response to the Hurricane threat revealed the technical limitations facing their armoured forces. Initial attempts to increase top armour thickness on Panzer III and IV tanks proved impractical. Additional armour plate increased weight, reducing mobility and overtaxing already stressed transmissions and final drives. Field modifications included welding spare track links to turret tops, a makeshift solution that offered minimal protection at the cost of further weight penalties. More effective were tactical adaptations. Tanks began moving in dispersed formations rather than columns, increased the number of anti-aircraft guns assigned to armoured units, and operated under camouflage netting, when stationary. These countermeasures reduced but never eliminated the Hurricane's effectiveness, illustrating the fundamental vulnerability of armoured vehicles to specialised air attack. By early 1943, the Hurricane's anti-tank role began transitioning to newer, more capable aircraft, particularly the Hawker Typhoon, equipped with rockets rather than cannons. This transition reflected both technological evolution and tactical lessons learned. The 60-pound warheads of the RP-3 rockets provided greater destructive power than 40mm cannon shells, while the Typhoon's superior speed and performance offered better survivability against improving German air defences. Yet this transition should not obscure the Hurricane's pioneering contribution, as Air Commodore Adrian Boyd, Director of Tactical Development, wrote in April 1943, "The Hurricane Tank Buster program demonstrated conclusively that aircraft can be effective anti-armor weapons when properly configured and employed. The lessons learned have shaped our entire approach to battlefield air support and will influence air doctrine for decades to come." The influence of the Hurricane Tank Buster extended far beyond its operational lifespan. When Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Normandy in 1944, the air plan included dedicated tank-killing squadrons equipped with rocket-armed Typhoons, a direct institutional descendant of the Hurricane units in North Africa. These aircraft would play a decisive role during the critical Battle of the Falaise Pocket in August 1944, when Typhoon attacks destroyed over 100 German armoured vehicles in a single day, contributing significantly to the collapse of German resistance in Normandy. The tactics employed by these Typhoon pilots, approaching at treetop level, popping up to acquire targets, then executing precise diving attacks, were directly inherited from procedures developed for Hurricane operations in the desert 2 years earlier. The Hurricane's transformation from obsolete fighter to specialized tank killer embodied a broader philosophical approach to warfare that distinguished British military thinking. Rather than pursuing technical perfection at the expense of practical utility, a tendency that often characterized German weapon development. British forces emphasized adaptability, field modification, and tactical innovation using existing resources. This approach recognized that in modern industrial warfare, it was often more effective to adapt current equipment to new roles than to wait for perfect but delayed solutions. Air Marshal Arthur Tedder, who oversaw air operations in North Africa, summarized this philosophy succinctly. In war, the adequate solution available today invariably outperforms the perfect solution delivered tomorrow. The human stories behind these statistical successes reveal the extraordinary courage required for the specialized mission. Flight Lieutenant Michael Whitley, a Hurricane IID pilot with No. 6 Squadron, described the experience in a letter home discovered after his death in action. There is something fundamentally unnatural about deliberately flying toward concentrated fire. Every instinct screams to turn away, yet we push forward, focused entirely on the target. The moment of attack itself passes in a blur of adrenaline and concentration, lining up the sight, judging the range, feeling the aircraft buck as the cannons fire. It's only afterward, when you see the smoking wreck below and realize what you've accomplished, that you understand why we do this. Whitley would be killed 3 weeks later when his Hurricane, damaged by flak while attacking a German tank column near El Alamein, crashed during the return flight. He was 22 years old. The psychological toll on these pilots rarely appears in official histories, but emerges clearly in personal accounts. Operating at extreme low altitude, often alone or in pairs, with minimal chance of rescue if shot down behind enemy lines, Hurricane tank busters experienced combat stress rates significantly higher than their fighter or bomber counterparts. Squadron medical records from No. 6 and No. 7 squadrons show that the average operational tour for tank buster pilots was 25 missions, half the standard fighter tour, before psychological symptoms became severe enough to require rotation. Dr. Charles Simmons, consulting neuropsychiatrist to the RAF, conducted a specialized study of these units in early 1943, concluding, the particular combination of stressors faced by these crews, the requirement for absolute precision while under intense fire, the graphic nature of the destruction they witness at close range, and the isolation inherent in their mission profile, creates a uniquely challenging psychological environment. Beyond its military significance, the Hurricane Tank Buster program represented a triumph of improvisation in the face of necessity. The aircraft's success contradicted pre-war military orthodoxy that had dismissed aircraft as ineffective against armoured vehicles. Air Marshal Hugh Dowding, whose fighter command had won the Battle of Britain, had famously testified to Parliament in 1938 that aircraft cannot effectively engage tanks with onboard weapons, a view shared by most military experts at the time. That this conventional wisdom proved so thoroughly wrong offers a timeless lesson about the dangers of rigid thinking in military affairs. Innovation often comes not from elaborate planning or perfect technology, but from the creative adaptation of existing resources to meet unexpected challenges, precisely what the Hurricane Tank Buster program exemplified. The legacy of Flight Lieutenant Allard extended beyond tactical innovation to influence strategic thinking about air power's role in land warfare. Prior to the Hurricane's success against tanks, air support for ground forces had been conceived primarily in terms of bombing enemy positions or strafing exposed infantry, both relatively indiscriminate applications of firepower. The precision engagement of specific high-value targets like tanks represented a fundamental shift toward what modern military theorists would call effects-based operations, using air power not merely to destroy but to shape the battlefield by eliminating critical elements of enemy capability at decisive points. This conceptual evolution would continue through subsequent conflicts, from Korea and Vietnam to the Gulf Wars, ultimately leading to modern precision-guided munitions that can target specific components of individual vehicles. Perhaps the most profound testament to the Hurricane Tank Buster's impact comes from the enemy it fought. Interrogation records of captured German tank commanders reveal a respect that borders on awe. Oberleutnant Karl Rossmann, a Panzer III commander captured near Tobruk in June 1942, stated, "We feared your Hurricanes more than your tanks or anti-tank guns. Against ground weapons, we could maneuver, use terrain, employ our superior optics and gunnery. Against the Hurricane, particularly in clear weather, we felt naked and exposed. To see your comrades' tanks suddenly explode, seemingly from nowhere, creates a unique terror." This psychological impact multiplied the Hurricane's military effectiveness, creating an uncertainty among German armoured forces that degraded their operational tempo and confidence. The Hurricane's transition from frontline fighter to specialised tank killer carried symbolic significance beyond its tactical impact. It demonstrated that apparent obsolescence need not mean irrelevance, that equipment seemingly overtaken by technological progress could find new purpose through creative adaptation. This lesson resonated particularly strongly with Britain in 1941 and 42, a nation fighting desperately to bridge the gap between initial unpreparedness and full industrial mobilization. The Hurricane's successful reinvention embodied the broader national spirit of making do with available resources while working toward more comprehensive solutions, a philosophy captured in the popular phrase, improvise, adapt, overcome, that became something of an unofficial motto for British forces throughout the Middle East campaign. For James Cobber Allard, the New Zealander whose skill and courage had demonstrated the Hurricane's potential as a tank killer, the war continued long after his 14-tank day. Promoted to squadron leader in December 1940, he went on to command No. 260 Squadron in North Africa, flying both Hurricanes and later Spitfires. His combat career ended in July 1943 when he was shot down over Sicily, but survived to become a prisoner of war. After repatriation in 1945, Allard returned to New Zealand, where he established a crop dusting business, applying the low-level flying skills he had perfected during the war to agricultural aviation. When interviewed for an Air Force documentary in 1976, Allard displayed the modesty characteristic of his generation. "We were just doing what needed to be done with what we had available. Nobody thought we were making history. We were simply trying to win a war with the tools at hand." The story of the Hurricane tank buster offers timeless lessons that transcend its specific historical context. It reminds us that innovation often emerges not from abundance but from constraint, that necessity truly does mother invention. It demonstrates that technological advantage doesn't always determine battlefield outcomes, that tactical creativity and human courage can overcome apparent material inferiority. Most importantly, it illustrates that warfare ultimately remains a human endeavor, where individual skill, adaptability, and determination frequently outweigh purely technical factors. As modern military forces face ever-evolving threats with constrained resources, the Hurricane's transformation from obsolete fighter to devastating tank killer offers an enduring example of how imagination and courage can convert apparent weakness into unexpected strength. The Hurricane story embodies a pattern seen repeatedly throughout military history, the tendency for specialized capabilities to emerge through adaptation rather than dedicated design. From Civil War ironclads to improvised explosive devices in modern asymmetric warfare, necessity consistently drives innovation more effectively than pre-planned development. What distinguished the Hurricane program was the institutional flexibility that allowed this grassroots innovation to scale rapidly, from experimental concept to operational capability. The Royal Air Force, despite its traditional conservatism, recognized the potential of Allard's achievements and rapidly institutionalized both the technical modifications and tactical lessons, creating a systematic approach that could be replicated across multiple squadrons and theaters. This organizational adaptability, the capacity to identify successful improvisation and quickly standardize it, ultimately proved as important as the technical innovation itself. The human dimension of this story extends beyond the pilots to encompass the ground crews who maintained these specialized aircraft under extraordinarily difficult conditions. The Hurricane IID, with its complex cannon installations and specialized sights, required meticulous maintenance to maintain operational readiness. Technical sergeants like Alfred Thompson of No. 6 squadron became unlikely heroes, working through desert nights in temperatures that dropped below freezing, using makeshift tools and salvaged parts to keep their aircraft flying. Thompson's diary, preserved in the Imperial War Museum, records the pride these maintenance crews took in their aircraft. Watched our Hurricanes return today, all 6 serviceable despite heavy flak. Sergeant Wilson's aircraft had taken a shell fragment through the starboard wing but remained controllable. Repaired damage using skin panel salvaged from wreck near El Adem. Pilot reported aircraft handled perfectly on morning sortie. There's a special satisfaction in keeping these old birds flying when everyone said they were finished. As the war progressed, the specialized anti-tank role, pioneered by the Hurricane, evolved into a more comprehensive concept of battlefield air interdiction. By 1944, dedicated fighter-bomber groups operated as an integrated element of Allied ground offensives, targeting not just tanks but the entire enemy logistics and support system, fuel trucks, ammunition dumps, transportation networks, and command facilities. This more holistic approach to battlefield air power traced its conceptual lineage directly to the Hurricane tank-buster units, which had demonstrated that precisely applied air power could influence ground operations not merely through mass destruction, but through the selective elimination of critical capabilities. Air Vice Marshal Harry Broadhurst, who commanded No. 83 Group during the Normandy campaign, explicitly credited the Hurricane experience. What we learned in North Africa with the Hurricane IIDs established the fundamental principle that air power on the battlefield is most effective when precisely targeted against enemy vulnerabilities, rather than simply maximizing destruction. The technical lessons learned from the Hurricane program directly influenced post-war aircraft design. The concept of a rugged, heavily armed aircraft optimized for close air support led directly to specialized ground attack aircraft like the British Hawker Typhoon and its successor, the Tempest. In American service, this philosophy manifested in the Douglas A-1, Sky Raider, and ultimately in the A-10 Thunderbolt II, an aircraft whose entire design revolves around a massive 30mm rotary cannon optimized for anti-tank warfare. The Hurricane's example demonstrated conclusively that ground attack aviation required different design priorities than air superiority fighters, emphasizing survivability, weapons payload, and low-altitude handling over maximum speed or high-altitude performance. This specialized approach to aircraft design for battlefield support missions remains standard practice in modern air forces, with purpose-built attack aircraft like the Russian Su-25 Frogfoot and American A-10 continuing to demonstrate their value, despite repeated predictions of their obsolescence. For the German forces who faced the Hurricane tank busters, the experience prompted a fundamental re-evaluation of armored warfare doctrine. Pre-war German thinking had emphasized the tank's offensive capabilities, with protection focused primarily on frontal aspects to counter anti-tank guns. The Hurricane's attacks exposed the vulnerability of this approach, demonstrating that modern warfare required omnidirectional protection. Post-war German tank design, beginning with the Leopard series, incorporated significantly enhanced top armor protection and eventually active defense systems specifically designed to counter air-delivered weapons, direct descendants of the lessons learned at such cost in North Africa. Generaloberst Heinz Guderian, the father of German armored warfare doctrine, acknowledged this shift in his post-war writings. The experience against British fighter bombers in North Africa and later in Normandy demonstrated conclusively that tank design must account for threats from all dimensions, not merely from ground level but from above. Well, the Hurricane's transformation carries particular resonance today as military forces worldwide grapple with limited budgets and rapidly evolving threats. The principle of adapting existing platforms for specialized roles rather than developing entirely new systems for each requirement offers both economic and operational advantages. Modern examples include the conversion of transport aircraft to gunships, the repurposing of anti-ship missiles for land attack, and the adaptation of training aircraft for counterinsurgency operations. Each instance echoes the Hurricane's journey, finding new purpose for existing platforms through creative modification rather than replacement. As military historian Sir Basil Liddell Hart observed in his analysis of the North African campaign, the most effective innovations in warfare rarely involve revolutionary new weapons, but rather the revolutionary application of existing weapons in unexpected ways. Perhaps the most profound aspect of the Hurricane tankbuster story lies in its demonstration of how individual initiative can change the course of warfare. Flight Lieutenant Allard had no special authority, no extraordinary resources, and no mandate to develop new tactics. He simply recognized a possibility that others had overlooked and had the courage to attempt what conventional wisdom deemed impossible. His success catalyzed institutional change that ultimately saved countless Allied lives and contributed significantly to victory. This pattern of frontline innovation driving institutional adaptation represents one of the most powerful mechanisms for military effectiveness. Organizations that can identify, validate, and scale such bottom-up innovation consistently outperform those that rely exclusively on top-down direction, particularly in the chaotic and unpredictable environment of combat. The story of the Hurricane's reinvention as a tank killer ultimately transcends military significance to touch on fundamental aspects of human creativity and resilience. It reminds us that apparent limitations often contain hidden opportunities, that obsolescence is frequently a matter of perspective rather than objective reality, and that imagination, combined with courage, can transform seeming disadvantage into unexpected strength. In an era increasingly dominated by technological determinism, the belief that superior technology inevitably produces superior outcomes, the Hurricane's success offers a necessary corrective. It demonstrates that the human elements of warfare, adaptability, creativity, courage, and determination, frequently prove decisive even against seemingly superior technical capabilities. For the men who flew these modified Hurricanes into the teeth of German anti-aircraft fire, technical analysis and strategic implications mattered less than the immediate reality of their dangerous mission. Their perspective emerges vividly in the poetry of pilot officer John Gillespie McGee, who served briefly with a Hurricane squadron before transferring to Spitfires. Although he did not fly the tankbuster variant, his poem Low Flight, a sardonic response to his more famous High Flight, captures the tankbuster pilot's experience. I've skimmed the hedge tops with reckless ease, put treetops and power lines behind, and done 100 things you would not dream to do, and some I'd rather not recall to mind. This gallows humour reflected the remarkable resilience of young men who repeatedly flew missions, knowing the statistical improbability of long-term survival. As we reflect on the Hurricane's journey from outdated fighter to devastating tank killer, we find not merely an interesting historical footnote, but a timeless parable about human ingenuity in the face of adversity. The apparent weaknesses of the Hurricane, its dated design, its limited performance, its seeming obsolescence, became the foundation for its unexpected second life as a specialized weapon that changed the course of the Desert War. This transformation reminds us that innovation often emerges not from abundance but from necessity, that apparent limitations frequently contain hidden opportunities, and that the creative application of existing resources often proves more effective than waiting for perfect solutions. In our current era of rapid technological change and evolving threats, the Hurricane story offers enduring inspiration, a reminder that imagination, courage, and adaptability frequently matter more than superior specifications or resources. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.